Hey, what's up, guys? So this is a week five vlog for San Diego Code School full stack program. Just I think last week I touched on finishing up a few projects from React, a React 100 module to be specific. Um, this past week I have literally just been working on one project, and it's probably one of the biggest projects inside of the whole curriculum, and that project's called VSTDA. Um, it's just an acronym that just stands for Very Simple to Do app, but it's not very simple to do for sure, at least for me. I felt like I've hit a ton of hurdles with this project. Um, I think people normally say it takes on average roughly maybe like a week or more to complete this project, and I definitely see why now. Um, Definitely, most challenging part of it has been how to pass props and state into different components and being able to retain like object instances within certain components. So, in other words, if you have multiple components, how do you pass, let's say, one value to another component, which carries on to another component, and maybe even carries on to another component? Because you'll have a main component, and then I had all these child components embedded inside of the main component, and then they get rendered out from top to bottom essentially. So, top being the parent component, and then working your way towards the bottom, which are you have a bunch of child components. I tried to, when I initially did my wireframe for this project, I definitely try to keep it as simple as possible, which is something I highly recommend for anybody who is planning on attending this program and has to do this project or maybe something similar to it. Um, Want to be wary of how many components you have, because based on how many components you have, you will have to interlink their functionality, right? So um, I feel like that was definitely one of the most challenging aspects of it, as well as just like fundamentally understanding how the data flow is traveling throughout the React application. So it's important to know, like for example, when you're working with child components and it goes to grab a piece of data that's initially coming from the parent component, it doesn't necessarily reach up to the parent component from like a bottom up. It actually goes all the way to the top component and pretty much cascades down to child components. So like wrapping your head around that initially is something that it's kind of like tough to do, I would say, because it's um, definitely has a lot of its challenges and whatnot. So I had definitely been doing that. This past weekend, the school was closed, so we pretty much had a 4 day weekend for 4th of July, which was nice. But at the same time, I had a wanted to do at least a little bit of coding each day. I feel like it's getting much, much, much harder in the curriculum, at least for me. And I mean, you're definitely going to be challenged for sure. If you go to San Diego Code School and you enroll in, I believe they have a front end and back end program now. I don't know if they still have full stack, but um, definitely it's going to be challenging for sure. I think in the beginning it's challenging, but not like very challenging. But now I feel like the point it's definitely very challenging. But all that definitely means is really got to buckle down and research a lot of documentation and definitely do your best to try to understand everything. Another piece of advice for anyone who's planning on attending this program is don't necessarily try to understand every single thing. I think as long as you get the general idea of what's going on and you're able to somehow get your application to work and as well as like pass the tests that you have to pass, um, I think that's pretty solid. But that being said, I mean, I'm definitely one of those people who always try to seek to understand every single thing, and that's a good thing, but it can also work against me. So, one thing I'm trying to do is find a better balance as to how often I look up examples, how often I read up documentation, and versus trying to actually just tackle the code head on and then like literally just doing trial and error, like try this, see if that works, try this, see if that works. I feel like you definitely want to choose the later option, just because I feel like you're going to learn more by literally doing versus like simply reading an example, and then even if you get it, it's going to kind of be a different story, right, when you go to apply it. So I'd say both are useful, but it's something that I'm definitely starting to learn a lot more now, that while it's good to reference things, it's definitely better to try to tackle things and like literally just whatever you're trying to do or accomplish, just Google it literally. And more than likely you'll come across some thread on Stack Overflow or some forum or some, website like W3 Schools or whatever. So very challenging, for sure. Um, I feel like it's only going to get more challenging, if anything, because now I'm going to be dealing with other applications, I'm sure, that are also going to have multiple components. So, like, for example, after I wrap up this VSTDA project, there's essentially a hackathon where you pretty much dedicate 2 to 3 days versus creating your own custom application where you get a chance to choose like the APIs that you want to work with and stuff like that. But the main thing is like you come up with this idea, and um, it'll most likely be in multiple components, just like the VSTDA was, but except you're going to now, call on APIs and stuff like that in order to get information inside of, to make your project work. So I'm looking forward to that, but right now I'm definitely just trying to take things one day at a time. I feel like it's easy to get overwhelmed in a boot camp, especially if you're like looking at the whole big picture of like how much you have to do. um, and that's okay. But I think it's important to like kind of just check yourself and just say, hey, like let me just take this one day at a time. Like try to set little small goals on what you want to accomplish for a project. Doesn't necessarily mean like you have to complete a whole project, but maybe you have like a piece of the project that you want to get done. So that's something I've been trying to do for myself, is create little small goals that lead up eventually to like the bigger goal, right? So it's like laying brick by brick until you get a full wall, right? So, that being said, I'm almost done with the VSTDA application. I should hopefully be able to wrap everything up by tomorrow, get that submitted, and then it'll be on to the hackathon from there. Yeah, so until then, I'll discuss the hackathon next week, but I'll see you guys next week.